Your attention, please. Paul and Alex are required to proceed to the gate immediately.
What?
No way.
What is happening here?
This is the last call for the Layovers podcast.
Really?
Come on, man. This is our thing. We got this.
Oh, yeah.
And we made it.
Of course, geeks.
Flight 65 to Boston Logan International Airport.
Hey, who's that? Who do I have here? That's usually me that does that. Alex, is that you?
No. This is his brother Will from Mastication Nation.
Oh, you are the producer, executive producer, director, cinematographer, music director, orchestra man, and the caterer for the Los Angeles Attaché episode.
You missed Snake Handler as well, but yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, Will Hunter, thank you so much, Will, for being with us today.
No problem.
I mean, with me, because your brother is not here. Is there a reason for that? I'll let you announce it.
Yes, yeah. Alex is indisposed as his wife Deanne gave birth to their third child and first girl. And I'm not sure if you know this, but because it's all Hunter boys, but we're going back through the lineage, and this is going to be the first girl born into the Hunter family in almost 150 years.
Are you kidding me?
No, we only have boys.
God.
Yeah, this is how special this girl, Juno, is.
I had no idea. Wow. Oh, that is. Wow.
Yeah, we're looking back through the records, but it looks like probably 1880 was the last girl.
My God.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Alex, I know he doesn't know that we're recording this, actually. He will suddenly have an episode popping out on his Apple Podcast app and like, what's going on here? Paul, what did you do? So congratulations, Alex. I mean, we already said it. It's he put a picture of Juno on Instagram. It's public. If you guys want to say hi to Alex, I think that's the best way because he's off Facebook, off everything. Mm-hmm. But I think he reads the comment of that picture. Cube Dweller on Instagram. So Boston, why Boston? You chose that.
I did choose Boston. It's a little bit of a love-hate with Boston. I am married to a girl from the New England area, and we did the long-distance thing all the way through college.
I hope that's the love part and not the hate part.
Oh, exactly. No. It's the love conquered my hatred for this airport. It's such a terrible airport, but I endured. I used to go there every spring break, every summertime. You know, the benefit of it being a staff traveler, being a hunter, we all worked in the aviation industry, and I got to jump on standby flights constantly flying out to Boston. And so it really is a terrible airport, but it felt with the current snowmageddon or snow bomb or whatever they're calling it in the East Coast right now, it was an entertaining airport to talk about.
I haven't been forever in that airport. We actually covered that airport with Alex's point of view in episode, 36 or 38. Guys, just look it up. I remember, though, not what we said about the airport, but I clearly remember it was the episode which turned out to be a therapy for Alex because they just had announced Virgin America was bought by Alaska or something. So I think that's a very hard episode for Alex. Did you ever work at Virgin America? Because you said you were in the aviation industry. Did you work at this airline or any other in the U.S.?
No, I never worked for Virgin America, but I worked for Virgin Mothership, Virgin Atlantic, when I was 16 through 19. 17 through 19. I used to work in the summer vacations in the ticketing office at the world headquarters are just outside of Gatwick. And I would go there, basically be a data processor for 3 or 4 weeks at a time, take my money, and then go travel the world. Wow. Virgin Atlantic and Uncle Richard have been very kind to the Hunter family. We've all worked there in some capacity, I suppose.
For those who don't know you, because they're not listening to Mastication Nation, which we'll get into in a minute. So you're based in California, yes. But that means that you used to be based in London?
Yes.
Then?
I've mentioned on Mastication Nation, go subscribe if you want to learn anything about the culinary world with the co-host Alex Hunter from this podcast. I used to go to boarding school in England, and I went to university in England as well. So during the downtimes in the summertime before going off and visiting Kate, my wife, then girlfriend, or going down to visit my parents in South Africa, I would work. My dad was among other things, whilst back in the headquarters, was basically head of operations for all the Virgin airports. So I used to catch a ride in with him, sit in the ticketing department, and then I doubt it's still the same way, but the aviation industry does innovate very slowly. As you create your ticket, it would try and automate the process and send you an email confirmation. But there's probably thousands upon thousands where there was something slightly wrong where it would kick it to a real person like myself, where maybe the information was confusing. It couldn't find the right zip code to put in, and I would double check that information and then process it. And then that would either kick out an email confirmation to the person or a physical hard ticket, and I would have to mail that out. Real mailroom stuff to get through university and high school, but it gave me free access to international travel. So not a terrible way. Well, I got it also through my dad, but also I could get a slightly higher priority by working there as well.
On Virgin flights, or were you able at some point in your career and or through your family to have these kind of standby tickets with any other airlines?
Yeah, just because my dad had worked for Cathay Pacific for so long, we were able to take advantage of One World. Virgin being at the time so standalone in its own little world of alliances, everyone so saw it as the little brother and kind of took care of you. But you were the lowest of the low. I mean, I remember trying to get to the US one time and I got bumped off 4 flights to a point where I was like, just get me anything in the continental US and I'll figure it out from there. Nobody wanted to give me the time of day. And I've sat on a million jump seats, a million love seats. You know, one time I've even sat in the cockpit well after 9/11. So I have no idea how that one got through, you know, that kind of stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned little brother, I know you are 3 brothers in total. Where do you stand in the order here?
So I'm the youngest.
Who's the oldest?
Alex is the oldest.
You're the
Alex is the old man of the group.
Yes.
Our brother Andrew, who also lives in England, is the middle one. And then I'm the youngest by about 5 years. I'm 7 years younger than Alex, but he doesn't patronize me too much. So, yeah.
But you made the better choice of where to live, because living in California now, you probably don't have any conception of what the snow is or cold that we have. There's actually a leak in my house where I'm recording from today, and I'm watching, you know, the ceiling getting damper and browner and browner. And I'm like, it's Sunday, because we're recording today, Sunday, 7th of January, 2018. And I'm so wish that I would be in California, maybe not for the wildfires, but I mean, what's the temperature there?
It's so funny that you mentioned this, because I got up this morning to let my dog out and give him breakfast and stuff like that, and opened the door, and I'm just like, am I in London? It was about, visibility was maybe 10 feet. It was so foggy. I couldn't. So it is warmer than it has been. It's probably right now in the low 40s. So that's what, like single digits in Celsius. I've had to remember that whole system, Celsius and Fahrenheit, which is always fun. But it's something that I feel I've lost my winter coat. I used to live in Boston a long time ago, and I could handle the cold. And now if it gets anywhere close to freezing, I'm bundled up and not going outside.
I'm the opposite, actually. Of course, I was born in Switzerland, thus I'm used to the cold. But then I lived in different other places, and being in London now, I used to see Londoners and other people in the UK would see, guys, it's cold and you're in a t-shirt. Oh, yeah. Are you mad? And now I'm like that. I do that all the time. And my friends will look at me and say, Paul, you're completely crazy. You're insane, batshit, or what? Well, you get used to it. So last question before we go to actually meet at the show. Do you still work in the aviation industry? What's your current...
Not at all. No. I've been out of the aviation industry for about 10 years, although it is still a passion of mine. Currently, what I do is there was a Reddit article which was explain in one sentence poorly what you do. And there was stuff like, I am an emergency Uber driver. And then someone worked out that he was an ambulance driver. And so my little teaser riddle was, I make money putting something between you and what you love. No one got it. And what it was is I work for an ad serving company. So whenever you want to watch a video, or, you know, you're watching your latest episode of Hulu or onto Hulu or whatever it might be, and then a pre-roll ad runs first, my company is processing that and ad serving that. So yes, we make money on your tedium and your annoyance of pre-roll advertising.
Guys, please do not use ad blocking software to listen to this.
Exactly. You're literally taking money out of my pocket when you do that.
So it's the first episode of 2018, so we should have started by that. Happy New Year.
Yes, to you too.
Happy New Year, everyone. The news that pretty much everybody talked about for many, many reasons. 2017 was the safest year in aviation for jet aviation, so not props, turboprops, but for jet aviation. Not a single crash, which is good news. Of course, when that news came out, people were like starting some, the usual nitpicking that you find that some people, there's this freighter. Mm-hmm. No, it's not freighter. We're talking about passenger airplanes. But of course, the big one was when our friend and your president, Donald J. Trump, said that it was thanks to him. So that was a bit funny. I mean, we're not here to do politics, but well.
I mean, yes, I donated to an education charity last year, and apparently I've solved illiteracy in America. So that's
thank you so much.
Exactly about the level of impact I can see that can be correlated to the aviation industry.
But still, it's actually a pretty cool news. Not that he tweeted that, and he tweets a lot, as we know, but that the fact there was not a single crash. I read an article that said the chances of a plane being involved in a fatal crash is now 1 in 16 million. It's pretty it's pretty low. Of course, again, these statistics have to be taken by a grain of salt because depending on how you calculate, is it, people say, for instance, that taking a car or an elevator can be more risky than being in a plane. The thing is then if you ask how many times you actually take an elevator versus how many times you actually take a plane, these statistics are not as valid anymore. But anyway, it's still a very safe way. And we are very happy that there was not a single crash. I had one remark. I'm not going to do any shout outs because a lot of people would say, oh, thank you, Paul and Alex, for such a great show. And Alex is not on the show. And I would feel like, it's like talking how much of a great kisser your ex
was in front of your new partner.
Your current. Yeah. So I'm not going to do any shout outs once you're with me. But I had one remark that bugged me for the last episode. The last episode was St. Petersburg. Have you ever been to St. Petersburg yourself?
No, I've never been to Russia.
The airport was LED. And everybody piled on me, says, Paul, you were doing a Christmas show. The airport was called LED, and none of you guys, whether it's me or Alex, took any pun with the LED. Yeah, well, we suck. Clearly. Winter, the thing that happened at Christmas, I had chocolate. I had way too much chocolate. Chocolate, brown, lavatories, airplane. Oh no. My God. I'm sorry. That was a really bad transition. But what? Did you read that story, Will?
I did read this story, and only in the U.S. this probably happens in other countries, but we have a fantastically oversaturated media. And so I saw this article, and I was about to tweet it to you guys on the Layovers Twitter right as you posted it yourself, but did you have any details on why this happened or what occurred?
Yeah, so this it's first it was United. United cannot catch a break. I mean, it has nothing to do with United in that instance. Actually, it was a flight from Chicago to Hong Kong. A passenger went to a whole commotion, probably and mentally unstable, because honestly, in that case, I don't know what happened to him, and started going in 2 lavatories, not 1, but 2 lavatories, and because starting spreading all his shit, sorry to use that word, all around the lavatory, and even tried to flush his own shirt down the toilet. Of course, he was stopped by the crew when all this commotion was happening. They had to divert the flight to Anchorage, I think. So the guy was arrested, obviously, but he was not charged because, again, they thought that he was probably unstable. And I love there's one line from one official, maybe, I don't know, Anchorage police or something, that says, we don't think it's an act of terrorism. I'm like, yeah, right.
Chemical warfare.
But United cannot catch a break. Did you fly United when you were doing your back and forth to Boston? Which airline were you flying mostly?
Virgin, just because we had access to it, but occasionally United if I got bumped around. Occasionally British Airways as well if I was kind of lucky, but Virgin was the number one. They did fly fairly frequently from London to Boston, and it was just helpful. Actually, I kind of have a funny anecdote about that. One time I was flying back from Boston to London, and my wife was going to study at the University of Rome for about 6 months. And so she flew to London with me, and then she flew down to Rome after that. And I was standby, and she had a paid for ticket. And I was a little nervous about the fact that I was probably going to get bumped and she would get to London and, have no one there to meet her. I get a ticket. I get checked in. I get a standby ticket. I go through to the airside with her. And then all of a sudden over the PA, it said, can Mr. Hunter please come to the check-in desk? And the gate, sorry. And I was just like, oh no, this is going to end badly. They ask for my ticket, my standby ticket. And then they look at it and they ask for my wife's ticket and look at it. I'm like, what's going on now? And they hand me my ticket back, and it's a first class ticket, or it's upper class ticket because it's Virgin. Virgin. And I was like, okay, well, I feel bad. I'm just going to give this to Kate because she's never flown in a premium cabin at all. And then 2 seconds later, they hand her a upper class ticket, and nice. We actually got diverted to Shannon because of a medical emergency. She was the only person on the entire plane that was happy about that because we got a couple extra hours in upper class.
Well, when if it's your first time, to be honest, honest, I will always remember my first time. It was less than 10 years ago. And your first time, I mean, it's memorable. So you always wish like, hey, Captain, can you do like a little detour or something? I just want to see one more movie, a little bit more red, white or something.
At least our diversion was less intense than this United flight.
The other thing that people told about the last episode, I talked a lot about United. And the one thing I didn't mention, which is one of the staple, which is why I just asked you, Will, if you were flying United, the staple of United is obviously the sundae, the ice cream that you get on board, that you can't get on board. Most people were like, Paul, you flew United to the US and back and didn't have any ice cream. We didn't talk about it. No, I did have the ice cream on the way there. It's true that it's a staple. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. It's probably not the best ice cream I've ever had in my life, but it is something nice. I mean, people bash United, and I'm the first one to do that from time to time, to be frankly honest. But this is something, it's simple, but this is really cool. So have you tried the ice cream from United? Oh, no, what? Come on!
I have not, and a couple of people have mentioned it. I think on both the Mastication Nation Twitter and your own, that we should do a crossover episode where we talk about aviation food and travel food in general. We do have, because we work through alphabetically. We've just done J episode for Jam.
Ice cream was 009. I love that episode. That's
Perfect.
the one we talked about ice cream. Yeah.
Yes, we did. We had a whole episode about ice cream, but I was thinking because we're only a couple episodes away from L, and L could be layovers. And then we could do a crossover that way and talk about it. But I've never had their ice cream. I've had, I think it was Cathay Pacific, used to come by with very nice, it was either Haagen-Dazs or one of the other big international ice cream companies in the later parts of an evening flight. And I always used to love that.
Always wonderful. I mean, I try to pay attention to what I eat in the plane because I can overeat very, very easily because, you're bored and it's a long flight and la, la, la. But the ice cream was, the way they presented it was a nice touch. It was not just, the cup. I mean, again, not big deal, but yes, guys, because I've received so many emails and messages and Twitter messages. Yes, the ice cream was good. Yes, I should have talked about it. And I promise you, we'll talk more about. There was so much stuff I wanted to say about the United flight, but Alex was getting to the point. I was looking, because we look at each other like now with Will on the camera, and I was looking at Alex. I've been talking about United for 20 minutes, and Alex was buzzing off or something. I was like, I need to switch topics. So I'm going to go back to United. I promise you that. Since color white, from, of course, Sunday vanilla ice cream to snow. You mentioned it at the opening of the show, the blizzard, the snow couplings, whatever. We had one in London, and everybody's making fun of London Heathrow, which, deservedly, because some of the stuff, there was barely like an inch, like not even an inch, a tenth of an inch of snow, and the whole airport broke down. But it seems that JFK, especially over the East Coast, it's getting better now on Sunday. But it was a big, big, big disaster. I mean, you probably heard that all over the news in the U.S.
Yeah,
right?
so they're calling it a cyclone bomb, a snow bomb. They come up with these new terms, and I'm sure this one means something, but I can't tell the difference. I think it was more to do with the fact that, yes, the snow is coming in, but the temperatures are ridiculous. That they're so cold. And we had our in-laws from the East Coast staying with us over Christmas period, and they were supposed to fly back Thursday, but they moved their flight back to Wednesday morning so they could avoid this because they were flying back to Boston. And we were looking at the temperatures, and on Saturday, it was supposed to hit minus 20 degrees Celsius. I mean, if you don't know how to deal with it, that's going to shut down any airport. And that's what it comes down to is, so caveat, backing up a little bit, I used to work for the Discovery Channel, Discovery Digital Networks, which was their digital arm of that. And so in our office, we had the Discovery News guys, and whenever anything was going on in the world, I would just go downstairs and be like, hey, Trace, who was one of the hosts, explain this to me like I'm 5. And, he would be able to explain it to me. And he explained de-icing to me one time. And I'm just like, oh, okay. So it's not that the reason that airports shut down is usually because they don't have access to enough de-icing trucks, as opposed to like they're just not set up to handle that level of cold. It's surprising how well a plane can fly in very, very cold temperatures, because think about how cold it is when they're up in the air. It's just getting them off the ground to begin with is the problem.
Yeah, plus, again, when we talk about probably airports in Canada or airports in Northern Europe, they have these kind of conditions, maybe not all year long, but at least, 4 to 6 months a year. Whereas in New York, although already very north, it might not be the case that it's all the time. So this is really like once, and that's why we talk about it. Otherwise, the airport would be used to it.
Yes.
But it was actually quite interesting because there have been other blizzards that have, crippled the East Coast airports. But this one seemed to have had, especially in JFK, because it was a multitude of little things happening at the same time. There's been a little fire. There were as well this Kuwait Airways plane that was clipped by China Southern. They were both 777s. And, again, so many airplanes are on the tarmac. And I guess, again, human errors, one less gate to accommodate passenger, more commotion. They went, and that's actually quite extraordinary. They diverted flight back. There were flights that were flying to JFK that had to divert back. There was a flight from Moscow, an Aeroflot. I think it was 122. I think I saw that on Flight Radar 24. That over Iceland had to suddenly decided that JFK couldn't accommodate it. I think on Air France one happened the same. And it was this A380 from Emirates. Of course, Dubai being so much further, they couldn't just go back. So they flew, I think, first to Pittsburgh, and then they landed at Pittsburgh, and then they flew to Dallas, and they landed at Dallas, and then they were, last I heard, on their way to JFK, because now it seems to be better. They had up to 3 A380s from Emirates on the ground at JFK. That never happened. Aeroflot had 2 Aeroflot flights named 100 at the same time, which never happened. It shouldn't have 2 flights with the same call sign at the same time on the ground, or actually, and it happened because there were so much delay. So it was a bit of a chaos. It seems to be going better, but people were obviously, if you're going on Snapchat or anywhere else, people were complaining about commotion. Port authorities said they will investigate whether there's been, mistakes and la. One of the biggest problem was actually luggage delivery. Yeah. There were up to 6 hours of wait for luggages. So you've already, you land if you had a gate and not return back, already waiting up to 7 hours on the ground without a gate. And then, of course, when you get to the terminal, you're finally there, you're happy, and then you have to wait up to 6 hours for luggage. It must have been really hard, honestly.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that it seems like everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong to make it worse.
Yeah.
Because you'd think that somewhere like JFK would at least be a little bit more able to handle something like this kind of blizzard. I was in Seattle in December, and they had snow for the first time in forever in downtown Seattle, which is out at sea level.
Oh, wow.
And that freaked them all out. And I was flying back the day it snowed. And you run into those issues that you don't really think about. It wasn't that the planes couldn't take off. It's that the planes were all being diverted so that when the snow was falling, there was just no metal to get people out. So there was just people lined up sitting on the floor in all the terminals, just waiting for a plane to go anywhere. It was more, and I had a friend flying from LA to Seattle that day, and they couldn't get to Seattle for about 12 hours, whilst everyone was getting out quite easily. It was just getting into those scenarios. They just didn't know how to deal with it and how to get those planes there in time.
Airports always try to tell to people, or airlines, do not come to the airport. Yeah. But we know that not a majority, but a certain number of people would do it. And I get it. Why? Because you say, maybe I get a chance. I really need to get there tomorrow. I'm a freaking flyer. I deserve to be on the next flight or something. And you will get there, and you will, add more and more people in the airport, and that creates even more commotion. And thank God it's getting resolved. But it must have been, and you mentioned the story that your in-laws were smart enough to change their flight to avoid this.
Yeah. He was petitioning Southwest because they were flying via Chicago, and he was petitioning Southwest to allow him to change a couple days before. He could see the storm coming, and he was calling them, and they were like, "Oh yeah, sure, we can change your flight. That'll be an extra $550." And he was like, "No, this is a travel advisory." And then he waited another 12 hours, and then he finally got a response from Southwest saying, "Yeah, we'll change it for you. Don't worry about it." But it's kind of crazy how, he was trying to be proactive about it, and they were trying to penalize him for that.
I just said that there were issues with luggages, which again happens a lot when you have this sort of chaos. Did you work at ground handling at Heathrow?
Yes, right? So I did something that really doesn't exist in this country, in the US, but is fairly common throughout Europe and the Commonwealth, a graduate program. For some reason, it doesn't really exist in the US, or maybe I'm just not aware of it. So after college, after a couple of years, maybe 2 years after college, I went and did one it's now called Donata. You'll see them all on the ground at Heathrow. You'll definitely see them in Dubai. They are the ground handling and operations company owned by the Emirates group. And so my role there was to go through each and every single department there and do your classic sort of figure out how we can improve efficiency and learn the skills, and then figure out how we move forward into the next year. And so I got a great crash course in cargo, in logistics, in the food processing, getting people off the planes when there isn't a gate available, all that fun stuff. And some of their clients were obviously Emirates, Cathay Pacific, Virgin Atlantic, Qantas. I couldn't tell you who they still represent, but I'm sure at least a few of those are still their big players.
Were you able since to forgive, mistakes more when you are in the flight and say, I know what these guys are going through, thus I'm not going to be like outraged because my luggage is not here, or because we don't have a gate, or because can you empathize more because you've done that?
Do you know the term "never see how the sausage is made"?
Yeah,
like never look behind the curtain. Unfortunately, look, this was my dad's industry for 20, 30 years. He was ground transportation at some of the busiest airports in the world, Hong Kong, both the new and the old Hong Kong, Johannesburg, and a couple other places as well. Most notably and most recently Angola, which was fun. But so I knew how it worked, and I knew the level of professionalism my dad had to this process. And I think one of his things was from touchdown to getting your bags should never take more than 15 minutes at Hong Kong. That was the goal he was trying to hit.
Wow.
That was something that I always had in the back of my mind. So working in ground handling, I knew a lot of it. They are very, very deadly serious about what they do, but don't be surprised that they need to blow off steam. It is a very high stress environment. And so it's kind of like working in an oil rig. It's very, very sort of foul language, but they're very good at their jobs. But the thing that I understood the most, and I'm not sure if it's still valid, but the first thing I had to do, I had to take a counterterrorism course even before I started. I had to understand how to spot legitimate threats, how to understand how we process cargo for it to not be. So there's 3 ways that they test cargo before flights that are not just your normal luggage to make sure that it's completely safe. The probably most straightforward is they'll put it into a pressurized container, simulate the ascent and descent of a plane, see what happens there. That way, if it's something that is pressure sensitive, they'll know, and then they can send it off. If anyone is like, this has to be there on a certain date, they'll delay it because it might be a timer. I'm sorry if this is depressing on anyone who's flying.
No. It's interesting. It's fascinating on the contrary.
And so the timer obviously makes sense. If someone's adamant it needs to fly on a certain date, then that can set off red flags and you just hold it for a little bit. You can throw some customs things in their way. And then the one I thought that was the most interesting, and I spent a lot of time with these guys, was they would wrap a pallet in cling film and saran wrap, whatever you want to call it, for a certain amount of time, and then stick a syringe in there and pull out the air, and then get sniffer dogs to process the air. And then because you were concentrating the air that's in there, and they'd be able to smell if there's anything that there shouldn't be in there. So those are the 3 ways that we would test your cargo before it got onto the plane. But then you would have we'd be in the cargo hold and we would watch. You think, oh, it's just someone shipping luggage or it's someone shipping their home from one place to another. 90% of what's under your feet is making a lot of money for those airlines. So it's a lot of produce. And Cathay Pacific specifically I remember there being pallets upon pallets of champagne and lobster because it was coming from Paris or it was coming from France. And for some reason they got a better deal out of London. So they were shipping it to London and then flying it from Heathrow to Hong Kong. So it was all this Dom Perignon and lobster. And I was like, okay, this is kind of interesting. We had a couple of first generation Teslas and the high performance cars we had to load on as well. That was fun because everyone wanted to take their photos with them. But yeah, the ground transportation side of it is something you don't think about, but you just expect it to work. But it's like a small army.
It must be because, like you said, there's only the threats, but the efficiency of it and the imperatives of the business. As a passenger, the only side you really see as a human side of it is a dispatcher. You see that person running around, especially when a plane might be late or delayed, and you see that person trying to make everything fit together, especially at busy airports. Again, Heathrow, and I know not all the airports work that same way, but Heathrow has a system of also penalties. So the ground handling company and the airline get a penalty if they stay for too long at the gate. So they have to get the hell out of it. So the dispatcher's role is to make sure that everything is coordinated. The luggage is in, the cargo that this plane might have is in, the passengers is in, everything, and it has to take off and leave, because otherwise Heathrow would make you pay for it. And I know other airports work like that. It's not all the airports in the world, but I mean, enhancing your point about being a very high stress environment, you have to get things done fast.
Yeah, and there's the human aspect of it as well, because you're thinking of each piece of cargo as just numbers on a spreadsheet, but they also did the live animal transportations, and there's a little known fact that you cannot have a dog in the same hold, or a lot of people won't even do it on the same flight as a body. So we did a lot of repatriation of people who died in other countries, needed to get back to wherever. And so that was a very specific process that you had to go through, but dogs can sense it and they freak out. And so you have to be very, very aware of those kind of things that are not just, it's not Tetris. It's not like, I need to take up as much space as possible. It's thinking about the emotional impact of some of this stuff as well.
In my many years of traveling around, because I moved places, like homes, and so I had stuff shipped by airplane, so thank you, Will. And I had also my cats shipped by airplane, so thank you, Will. Although it might not have been you, but I mean, it's the things you don't always realize as a passenger. Hence my question at the beginning, and by stance, you have to empathize, because sometimes you get pissed off because something is delayed or whatever, and it's such a machine behind it, and people don't always just make decisions to piss you off. They make decisions because you want to have a safe flight. The person that you're yelling at is unlikely to be the person that caused or can fix your problem. I'm going to still send you messages when I'm pissed off at something. No,
I haven't been in that industry for, like I said, almost 10 years, but I still look out the window and know knowingly what's going on out there.
Well, you're two brothers. We said Alex and you, and there's a third one, but there's a story about two brothers. It was all over social media because this famous person that I had no idea, but it shows that I'm really old, Chrissy Teigen, some U.S. pop star or something. And of course, everybody now is going to tell me this. She's not a pop star.
She's married to John Legend, the musician.
Oh, yeah, I know him. Yes. Okay, fine. So I know. So she was taking a flight from LAX to, I think it was Narita. It was ANA, so it was the Japanese airline. It was just before Christmas, I think. She was going there for probably for the holidays. And 4 hours and 50 minutes into the flight, out of an 11-hour flight, the pilot decided to come back, this time not for snow reasons as in JFK lately, but because they realized they had an unauthorized passenger on board, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. The number of checks you have to go through just to board a plane, they make sure it's you, we have TSA, et cetera, et cetera. They had someone that was not supposed to be here. Chrissy was on the flight and tweeting about the ordeal, and it's unacceptable. Whatever. The interesting bit, the two brother thing, is that we learned since then that it was actually a willful. No, that's a very bad pun here. You must have heard this one all your life.
Oh, yeah. Where there's a will, there's a way. Yeah.
Two brothers that had a very similar name. One was booked on ANA. The other was booked on United. So the other brother was supposed to go to Tokyo from LAX on a United flight. For some reason that we don't know, the brother decided they wanted to fly together. They did a copy of the boarding pass. So they had twice the same boarding pass, but apparently their first names, which were not released, must have been close enough so that, when you don't pay attention, you just compare quickly the boarding pass with the passport. Mm-hmm. And the two were allowed in the plane. I don't know how it worked for the seat thing, because they probably had also the name seat number. Probably was an extra, seat somewhere. Was it after 4 hours and 50 minutes? Was it because they realized there was not enough food? And, there must have been something that triggered. But they reverted back to LAX because it was before the mid-flight, but also probably because it was a problem with LAX. And the captain decided that it was American authorities that had to decide what to do with the individuals, and also what to do probably with the whole, administrative fine, because there will be fines, maybe to the airline, maybe to the ground staff, and probably criminal charges to the two brothers. It's pretty staggering that you would have just to do a copy of a boarding pass.
Yeah, that does seem strange. In my head, while you were talking about that, I was thinking about Home Alone 2. When they're running late for the plane, they run into the ticketing agent and their boarding passes go flying, and they just let Kevin McAllister onto the plane to New York by accident. So unless it was Macaulay Culkin and his brother, who does have a fairly similar name, I think, it seems like that's willful deception by the passengers. So they're probably getting a lot more trouble than anyone else. However, it should have been caught by somebody. I'm interested to see what they turned back on. What the reasoning they turned back on. Was it that, again, they just don't want to deal with the storm that they're going to get when they land? They could have been like, unless the guy was drawing attention to himself, like just land and be like, okay, deal with it when you get there. But it seems like ANA did not want to go down that path.
No, they didn't want to. I assume that what happened in LAX is that the first brother comes in with a passport, checks in, or whichever brother was. The second goes, maybe, of course, not right after, separately. And even if the machine says maybe, it happens sometimes that, that's clearly probably a mistake from the ground staff. But the ground staff might have thought, this is strange. This passenger is already registered as someone was in the flight, but I have him in front of me. He clearly has a passport with the same name. Again, probably their names are very, very close together. And he or she decided to say, oh, well, there was a mistake in the software. So here you go. Please get in, sir. Right? It must have been something like that. But it's still crazy that it would have happened. I don't think it was a case of terrorism, etc. It was really a case of two brothers maybe probably wanted to fly together, but they're still stupid because you shouldn't do that.
And it reminded me of there's the travel writer Bill Bryson. He told a story back in the day about how he was trying to convince a very unenthused American Airlines ticketing person that Bill is short for William. So his ticket said Bill Bryson. However, his passport or his driver's license said William Bryson. And they were like, well, it doesn't say the same thing, therefore you can't. And this was back in the 90s. So, he was a little bit more irate than we can be these days. These days, you wouldn't have, you would have made sure they match up. But stuff like that is why these issues arise. Like if I can go by Will, I could go by Bill, I could go by Billy, and it would say William on my passport. That's how these kind of things happen.
And we are, because the old system was made, I'm going to use Western for Western people. When you think, I have so many friends in China or in Indonesia, or sometimes they have a name. They don't have something like a last name. They just have a name, and they had to kind of figure out last name. And also then you have, and I've seen that many times, friends of mine working in the aviation travel industry in general, they say, surname. And people, is it surname? Is it the first or the last? And what is the first or the last? Again, for us, it seems very evident because the system was clearly made for us. But if you think about other cultures and other names, sometimes it doesn't make any sort of sense. And it's
any of the Scandinavians, there's only 4 last names. Like it's Paul Paulson or Eric Erickson. Like, so that can get really confusing.
Yeah, really, it is really, even for me. I mean, I have a middle name, which is not because, I use my Swiss passport, and Swiss passports do not have a middle name section. So my middle name is attached to my first name. I've seen after years of traveling that unless it's the US, we're very stringent about it. And I get why. I never actually put my middle name, and it goes. If in the US, I forget to book my ticket with my middle name, I will have but your name doesn't match with your passport thingy, right? Mm-hmm. So it is sometimes, it's not as evident. We're not talking about these brothers anymore, but saying it's not always easy, I guess, for people that and I'm really not the more complex names. I mean, if you have really complicated, like Asian names, Chinese names, or it must be really sometimes not straightforward.
They also have when you're booking on most airlines, and just because I've been flying domestically so much, I forget if it's still on the international airlines. But there's otherwise known as sections when you're booking your flight to run through the system, because they need to know in these sort of scenarios. But also about maybe 8 years ago, someone with a name very similar to me was on a no-fly list, and I was getting flagged constantly.
Wow.
And so I had to no, that's not me. My middle name is Grant. This is not me. And so just putting as much information in there as possible will save you those kind of annoyances. I was always getting flagged and had to go talk to a special person in a small room.
So I don't know if the whole last name and no-fly links can get you all riled up. Sometimes it can be. There's so many reasons why we can be all riled up when we fly. and probably the people that were on the ground at JFK for hours and hours with no end in sight, but some of them must have been right. But this story, which happened, and you corrected me before we started recording, in Malaga, in Spain, there's this person who flew from London, Stansted. The flight was, I think it was Ryanair, and the flight didn't have a gate, probably. It had to stay on the tarmac for an hour, with, again, no end in sight, apparently. And this person who was sitting next to the emergency exit on the wing simply decided to open that window and just went and sat on the wing. Yeah. This is insane.
I wanted to know his thought process, and I read it through. I read the article, and he was just like, all right, I'm done with this. Took his hand luggage with him. He was like, I think he actually thought he was going to get away with it. Rather than like being a little unstable and like opening the door just to get out and get fresh air, he took his luggage like, all right, this is a way that we get out of the plane now. Like, I'm done.
I mean, you know what? Of course, don't do that. Of course, it's illegal. Of course, it's bad. But I have a hunch that there's a few people listening to this show that sometimes, after being, clogged in a plane for 3 hours with no end in sight, would have wished to do that. Like, I should just open the damn door and leave that plane now.
Wasn't there a flight attendant a few years ago who quit and then pulled the emergency slide whilst on the runway?
I think so, yeah.
I can't remember. I'm pretty sure it was US, but I'm sure your listeners will correct me if I'm wrong. But he was like, I'm done. I quit. I opened the door, pulled the slide, and that's a federal offense. So I think he apologized and got away with it. But yeah, don't do that.
I'm sure it also cost the airline to actually simply refit the door. You cannot just, put it back. It's not like a car door when you just close it and there we go.
No, it's the equivalent of the airbags going off.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. Do you have, we mentioned, of course, Boston, which we'll talk at the end of the show, but do you have an airport you really dislike or hate? That's a strong word in the world.
Well, Boston is one of those airports, sorry. There are airports that I dislike because they're not efficient. I used to feel this way about LAX, but after the most recent recording, the Attaché episode we did back in July, I feel like they've really stepped up their game. I used to have to fly down to LA every couple months when I was working for the Discovery Channel. My actual job was, in one way or another, I was a talent manager for YouTube stars. Wow. And so I had to go down there and make sure that they're 14-year-old living in their mom's basement on Twitch were still making, millions of dollars a year. No, I actually worked with more upstanding people in the education and news sectors of YouTube. But I used to go down there and I would choose purposely to fly in and out of Long Beach because it was such a small and lovely airport. And I think Alex and you have talked about it in depth, but that was my go-to. LAX, terrible. But Boston for me, if you're flying out of on United and Delta, I think it's Delta, just have the worst terminal setups. Their new terminal, Boston, and the international terminal are fine, but a lot of their domestic setup is just awful.
It's interesting. I'll go now and then I'll go through the article because there was an article in The Economist talking about the worst airports in the world, which I'll get to in a minute. But what you just mentioned reminded me something. It's in Europe and Asia, most of the airports are privatized, so fully private. Or sometimes in Europe and some in Asia as well, half-half or like some kind of equity share where there's a licensee that runs the airport. In the US, a lot of them are still actually under a public control. The reason that's important is that it actually changes the dynamic of the airport. What do you want to do with the airport? And when it's privatized, you want to make a shitloads of money, basically. Mm-hmm. So, meaning that you invest in the experience of the shopping experience, for instance. There's a reason. Let's take. I know I live in London, so I talk about Heathrow a lot. But I'm sure that a lot of our listeners, wherever they are in the world, will actually understand that. If you are in an airport that doesn't show you the gate at which your flight is supposed to be less than 30 minutes before its boarding time, which is, London will say only 30 minutes, no matter if the plane has been staying all night in front of the gate, only 30 minutes before the boarding time, will you know the gate number? Why? Because they want you to stay in the middle and shop. When you have airports that were built simply as bus terminals, like a lot of the airports in the US, because the US has been very early in developing airports, well, that's why they look like nothing, because the idea was, especially pre 9/11 security levels, you go there, you board and you leave. You didn't stay there, right? You might just have to take in a coffee or something. The other thing also that's interesting talking about that is to see pre and post security. Again, I'm going to take the example of Heathrow, but other airports, you'll see that. Again, travelers, think about it next time you're in an airport. The check-in areas of older airports are massive because people couldn't check online, whatever, so you had to queue and, give your luggage and whatever, especially the international airports. T5 is an example that this huge hall, when you can actually, check in, is half empty because times have changed. And now, most recent airports and recent terminals are built in a very small check-in area and a very big waiting area airside, because that's where you're going to, after security, you're going to wait and wait and wait. And that's how the airport is going to make money. So it influences, I think, our perception of airports.
Yeah.
That's why the Hong Kongs and Incheon look like shopping malls, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll come to that when we talk about Boston in depth, but that kind of makes much more sense as to why specific terminals, especially the domestic ones, are so terrible.
Yeah,
and I fly to Denver a lot, and Denver, to your point about small check-in areas, fairly small check-in area, and then they have this holding pit. They have one centralized building, and then that everyone processes through, like your security, and then you shuttle out to your individual terminals. So the entire population of the airport goes through the same security, and it's like it's nicer than this, but it makes me think of what coming to Ellis Island in the 10s in New York was like, just thousands of depressed people trudging through this giant hall with the American flag above you.
So, to the article of The Economist, let's not dwell too much about it. It's always fun to talk about, the perception of what's the worst airport is, of course, the airports you fly to, the airports you'll be experiencing. There's a few names that always come. Strangely enough, Charles de Gaulle, Paris, does not show up in this article. Alex and me really don't like Charles de Gaulle at all. That's why and I say that in every episode, we've been avoiding to discuss about it because we'd be very harsh on it. They mentioned a few, and one is, of course, Manila, and I used to live there, and they don't mention the fact that it's a bad airport because of the terminal. They say it's a bad terminal because of the corruption. Manila has been kind of sorted out, but there was an era where the ground handling, and sorry, it's not you,
no,
would actually, upon you landing, would add something into your bag because they were friends with the customs. Customs will arrest you, say, what is this? And expect like a bribe to basically remove them, and then you would be cleared. If you were unwilling, of course, to give a bribe, which they would have split with the person who had added that item into your bag, then of course you would have real trouble because they even added bullets, like live ammunition into, that's insane.
I'm not sure what the statute of limitation is on this, and so I'll be somewhat vague. But last time I was in the Philippines, let's just say money passed hands for me to be able to pass through immigration easily, because I'm sure the Philippines love their chicken, they love their pork, not a massive beef country. And so I was in Hong Kong, and let's just say a larger than okay amount of beef with dry ice was with me, and I didn't want to deal with immigration so much. I went through the processes, but a very nice immigration man helped me go a little faster than I should have.
That's still the case. I'm not condoning it. I think I said it in a few episodes ago that, I've fast-tracked myself through the terminal because they have, pre-terminal entrance security, and I fast-tracked myself by giving a little handout. So, but I do not condone that. But yes, it happens a lot.
Yes, it does.
Actually, that's still this. But at least that, I'm not excusing it, but compared to somebody adding something in your piece of luggage to then make you have that's really bad. The article says that Delhi is also very bad. And they say why, and that's very interesting. They say, since we know that a lot of the jobs will be taken away by automation, like immigration officers, you have now more and more airports of like e-gates, et cetera, you have a lot of airports where the current staff will be almost harassing you because they want to justify their job. So they will be very busy into checking your boarding pass 25 times through the process because each of them wants to justify that, yes, we need people, a machine will not be enough. And that sounded somewhat true sometimes. I'm like, this step is really unnecessary, but they still do it maybe just to give, maybe not in the US though, but.
No, I think I remember my dad telling me about this thing in Angola. When he got brought in to sort of fix one of their airlines, he was like, okay, let's improve efficiency. And he said, I want to, remove these amount of people because they're not really doing anything. I want to downsize it, make it more efficient. Then he gets a phone call from the government saying, I ran on new jobs. You can't get rid of those people. You can't get rid of those positions. That's definitely people trying to make sure that it was seeming like they were busy to maintain their jobs.
Yeah, and it's sometimes policies coming back to Manila. It's not the airport, but when I was living there, you could see in some of the big shopping malls, if you go to the cashier where you would pay your things, you'd have at least 5 people. One person would take your thing, give it to the other person, which would scan it to the machine. The third person would actually input the number in the machine. The fourth person would actually hand you the cash back, and the fifth person actually bag it for you. And it's totally inefficient, but it was a way, of course, to give jobs to the poor population. But it's always there's two sides. I understand the willingness of giving jobs. I'm not sure it actually helps a lot, but of course. Anyway, back to, because you said you might have taken some beef into Manila. There's an airport you should avoid then, Santiago de Chile. They're very, very strict about food imports, like Australia and other airports are. And I'm just going to read out here what the author said. I once got detained for 2 hours for failing to declare an unopened sealed bag of almonds. I then had to write a declaration expressing my contrition for bringing the nuts. When I failed to do so without cracking up, I was threatened with arrest. The lady next to me was being interrogated for smuggling in a lone banana. So this is not an airport for you, Will, nor for Alex, because you love your food.
I was going to say, a good thing it was only almonds and not Brazil nuts, because they wouldn't be happy about that.
Absolutely. Well, they go on for a lot of airports. I'm just going to give a little shout out to a friend of mine, Eric. Eric's a French ex-military, works now for United Nations. He's actually in the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. And he always tells you, guys, when you talk about worst airports, have you ever been to Bangui in Central African Republic or Lubumbashi, where he's saying these airports? And I'm like, yeah, fine. Obviously, I'm sure. So the article takes an interesting stance. It says, okay, remove all these airports because we know that most of them are, because they're old or corrupt, they might be good. Let's take only the income so the GDP per capita, and adjusted for a national income per head, several busy American airports will all be contenders for worst in the world. And the author says that Washington Dulles has the worst design ground transport.
Yep.
I haven't been in Dulles for 22 years, so I wouldn't be. But you said
I've been there. I was there about 2 years ago for a wedding, and my only bad experience. It's not the greatest airport in the world, but my bad experience also was kind of Virgin America's fault. Maybe my fault. We booked round trip flights, San Francisco to Washington D.C. Did not notice that the inbound flight was to Dulles and the outbound flight was Ronald Reagan. Is that the other one? So there's two DC airports. Yep. And so we, after the wedding, very, very, very hungover, drove back to the airport that we thought we were flying out of, only to try to scan our boarding passes and be told you're at the wrong airport. Have to jump in an Uber and drive across the city. And here's the thing. The Uber driver knew exactly what happened, that this happened so frequently that you think that someone would be like, maybe we shouldn't do this. But Dulles is one of those giant behemoths of an airport that hasn't got their stuff together like in Atlanta has. Although Atlanta just had this massive issue stranding thousands upon thousands of people. But that's rare for them. They are usually pretty on top of their game.
The author goes on talking about JFK. New York is supposedly one of the world's capital for shopping, and JFK has nothing. But the one that is crowned as being the worst in the world is Miami.
Which is strange, because I've never been. I may have been to Miami when I was very, very young and don't remember it, but I've not gone there as an adult traveler. But a friend of mine his family lives out there, and he's out there every 6 months, and he never really talks about how terrible it is.
I think the reason is the author is not US-based international traveler, so probably commutes through. If you want to go to Latin America, you usually commute a lot through Miami. It's one of these airports when you take layovers to go to South America. And if you don't have a US passport, it gets worse. And that's one of the intricacies of the US system, and I'm not here to bash the US, is like, I'm doing a layover in Miami because I want to go from, say, London to Santiago de Chile, which we just mentioned, and I'm using one of the US airlines. All the airports in the world, whether it's, I don't know, Hong Kong, Singapore, and okay, these guys know how to do layovers because that's their specialty, but all the other airports in the world, you don't have to immigrate in the country. At Miami, you have to do as if I were to enter the US, but I'm not entering the US because I'm just transiting to another international flight, then do it again to enter. It makes no sense. And that's probably why the author said that, because for us, it makes no sense we're not going to the US. We're going to Santiago de Chile, right?
Yeah, and I've seen so many lists where the U.S. aviation system stands. It's almost like its own echo chamber. So you can rank it. And I have friends that have never traveled abroad, and they're like, "Oh yeah, Miami or JFK, they're great. Why are you bashing them constantly?" I'm like, have you ever been to Changi? Have you ever been to Tokyo? Have you ever been to Hong Kong? No. Like, okay, then go to those places and then like rank again your experiences in the U.S.
Well, do you give me the perfect transition since we just talked about New York and you talk about great airports, great experience. We mentioned that with Alex, I think 2 episodes ago, the new Emirates first class, this fancy like single room with a ceiling high door. I mean, crazy. I don't know if you had any interaction with him when you were doing the work you were doing, but Casey Neistat did a vlog of him boarding, and he did clearly it was Brussels to Dubai, because as we said, this plane is only from Geneva to Dubai and Brussels to Dubai. And he, of course, filmed the whole thing, and yeah, that looks pretty cool.
I know. I don't know if I'll ever have enough points in the world to make that happen.
Neither, to be honest. I looked at it because as you might know, well, my hometown is Geneva, so I said, okay, I'm going to be in Geneva in a few weeks. So I said, if I need to go to Dubai or elsewhere in Asia, I might just take off from Geneva. And I was looking at upgrading myself, etc. No, come on, it's crazy. I might not have the chance to do it very soon. I'll try. Though, if guys you live in London, Emirates just announced that they will start flying from Stansted, which for me is baffling because Stansted for me is the hub of Ryanair.
Yeah,
they will fly from Stansted with the 777, so you will have that super fancy super first that they've just introduced from London Stansted. It's about 2.5 hours from where I live. London is a big city, so I'm not sure it makes sense to me, but I'll think about it, to be honest.
Yeah.
I wish I could take that one. Well, what do you use to book your flights? You use any OTAs, any preference?
9 times out of 10, I will be using a Google Flight Matrix just to find out what's going on, and then double check I can book it through the individual airlines themselves. But no, that Google Flight Matrix is where I spend most of my time.
Well, thank you, because I was just about to say how to talk about Google Flights, which is also the one I kind of defaulted to. I mean, of course, I use Matrix to do very strange routings and find great pricing and stuff, but Google Flights is the very visual, and you can actually book. I mean, it's easier to book from Google Flights. The links, they're deep linking from Google Flights. They've just introduced a new version of it. It's when you go there, google.com/flights, it might not appear, but on the right-hand side, it'll say, do you want to try the new version? Try it. It's actually pretty cool. The way they display the information is better, and they've introduced even smarter algorithms that will tell you, that flight historically will actually drop by 20% tomorrow, or more often than not, in 3 days, all data shows that this flight will increase by 15%. So, and it's not the booking.com, and I love booking.com type of like, this is our last room. Please, you have to click and book now. This is more like historical data to be used. That's actually very useful, I think, to make a better decision about when to book your flight. Because I'm a very last minute, I'm very bad. I'm very last minute. And at least I have this kind of sense of data that now for years that Google as at ATA is able to provide you with. And I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, and I just love that Google has the ability for me to track, and it will build this graph for me for the length of time that I have been tracking it, so that I can even pull out my own, analysis of the data myself if I don't trust, what I'm seeing, or if airline gets wise to it. There's these articles that say domestically it's 3 to 4 weeks before your flying time, and then internationally it's like 6 to 8 weeks. But I've got some.
Your mileage may vary.
Yeah, I've got some international flights coming up probably in the summertime that I'll be taking advantage of. The fact that Norwegian, I don't necessarily think has been following this sort of path as rigorously as every other airline, just because they're new and they're still bringing on new planes. But Oakland to London, they're doing, a lot. And that's something I'll probably be doing in the summertime as well. So
Have you flown them already?
No, I haven't. My mom flies them constantly when she, that's her go-to now for flying out to the US, because Oakland's much closer to where we live than San Francisco. But the fact that the weird American loophole law about having to have a hub in the U.S. And now, so my wife's family is technically closer to Rhode Island than it is to Logan. They're thinking about coming out to Europe as well, and they're like, I'm just going to go to Rhode Island and fly Norwegian directly to England because nobody flies out of Rhode Island. So I'll be interested to see what their experience is like, but I'm also very, very eager to see what Norwegian is going to be like as well.
Look, I've taken them only once. It was from JFK actually to Gatwick, and I liked it. I liked it a lot. I was in the premium economy. It's not the business.
Mm-hmm.
It's slightly larger seats, and you have a little bit more recline, and actually not a lot more of leg room. Of course, a little bit more, but I took the front row
mm-hmm.
one, and I had, of course, a lot of leg room. I mean, more leg room that I could use, and I liked it's reminiscent of probably a Southwest in the US, a mix of Southwest and JetBlue, but with a low cost factor in. The crew was super nice, engaging, and they know it's a low cost, the offering, but it's, you get what you pay for. It's not like your expectations are set. They're not, I'm not saying they're low. I'm saying they're easygoing. And it actually, the product is that. And I for the moment, actually, most of the friends of mine who have flown it actually have had great experiences. They reviewed it. I said, you know what? I paid like about £200 to go to the US. That calculates to $300 one way. It's nothing compared to 4,000 with United or something. So that's just, and it's great.
Paul, you'll relate to this. My friend who's flying in from Toronto in a few hours is 6'6", and Air Canada is basically the only one that flies this, and they basically charge you an arm and a leg, and their product isn't very good. Although their 777 that we flew from Toronto to London a couple of years ago was phenomenal, but their domestic stuff, when they kind of count Canada and the US as domestic, I'm pretty sure that I'll have to crack his back the moment he gets here, because he'll be doubled over on an Air Canada flight. So I'm glad to hear that you were able to fit into a Norwegian flight seat.
Do you do a transcon in the US at all currently?
I do it. I do it probably 2-3 times a year.
But nowadays, since Virgin now is Alaska, I mean, the brand hasn't gone away. Is it still your airline of choice, or is it depending on the price? Or?
No, and Alex made a good point about this a couple weeks ago, just because emotionally he finds it difficult. I fly Alaska a lot because I'm a Portland Timbers soccer fan, and we go up to Portland a lot to watch games.
Awesome.
And we go to Seattle to watch games up there because that's our big rival, the Sounders. And so Alaska is the airline of choice, and to the point where Portland Timbers shirt sponsor is Alaskan Airlines.
Oh wow! Okay.
And if you wear your jersey, you get to board first.
No way! That's awesome.
Because it's part of the sponsorship deal.
Wow!
So they're a solid airline. However, since the last few weeks, what's the word I'm looking for? Attention to detail and pride in the work of the Virgin America staff seems to have waned a little bit, and it's not that old. I mean, the product's exactly the same, but the soft product, the people, I feel like has fallen a little bit, which is understandable when you have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Morale is pretty low. JetBlue has been my go-to for East Coast travel. Recently, Alex did their Mint product when we did the PMC bike ride over the summer, and he loved it. But yeah, those two are my go-tos, Virgin and JetBlue.
I haven't flown JetBlue ever, and everybody always raves about it. Whether you don't have to be Mint, even like it's a great product that I really want to try it. But you know what? I haven't been to the West Coast of the US in forever. I'm not going to state the number because people are going to crucify me otherwise. But promise you will know when I'm coming, because apparently you're a great cook, so I want to know about that. Last bit of news before we go to Boston, just because it's Christmas Eve. I was supposed to tell it and I forgot. Actually, it's a kind of little elbow thing to Charles de Gaulle, again, Paris, the one that neither Alex and I really love. There was this homeless man that was not airside, it was landside. And, sad story. The homeless man is there and living basically throughout the year there. And whilst he was scavenging the trash, he was leaning on a door. The door opened. Somebody had forgotten to lock the door. He ended up being actually in a security company called Loomis. They actually, carry cash around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He found 2 bags and left with the 2 bags just, on Christmas Day. And there was 300,000 euros there and never to be seen again. So Merry Christmas to that homeless man, and Charles de Gaulle, get your act together.
That is insane.
Anyway. So Boston, love, hate. I don't know where you want to start with the love or the hate part.
So maybe I'll touch upon the fact that you just provided me some information that now makes a lot more sense. So Terminal B is set up in a horseshoe. And so you have Terminal B1 and Terminal B2. And it's separated by a parking lot. Like basically it's a 2-story. And then in the middle, you got departures, second floor, arrivals on the first floor. And it's mainly United, American, Delta, Virgin America's in there as well for the domestic side. Not Virgin America, but, all those other guys. Yeah. And the thing that drives me nuts about it is that the the land side before check-in, between you walking in through the doors to the security, it's a very, very long and skinny. It's probably about 25 feet. So basically you have these people lining up in security and they're taking up the entire corridor, and it's insane. So if you get certain parts of it, United, you go through and there's a little bit on the other side. But for Virgin America, I'm warning you now, if you're flying from Boston and you're flying Virgin America, do not go through check-in until the last possible moment. And I was like, well, that's why. It's because once you go through Virgin America check-in and security, they have their own security, you are in probably a 20 meter by 30 meter room, and there is nothing in there. It's a holding cell. And then they got their own two gates there, and that's it. There's literally nothing in there besides, I think there's maybe a Dunkin'. No, there's not even a Dunkin' Donuts, which is insane because the entire Boston runs on Dunkin'. But yes, that airport. I'll give you the pro side of Boston Logan International. Is that it is the closest international airport to the city than any airport I've ever flown to. It's even better than Lucy because you can see it from downtown. You can drive there in about 10 minutes from downtown. I think it's 5 miles from the center of the city. Unfortunately, it is surrounded by toll roads. So Ubers and taxis are crazy expensive. And they haven't really figured out the public transportation. You have to take this thing called the Silver Line, which is one of those buses that are also connected to the wires, and it goes into a tunnel as well. And as Alex mentioned in the attaché episode, it's the man bear pig of airport travel. It's the airport is falling apart and in certain areas, and they're redoing it. And their security, let me put it this way. We flew back from Boston on Christmas before last, and my wife got a snow globe as like a present from her family, and she completely forgot that it was in her hand luggage. What's in the middle of a snow globe? About a pint of water. Yeah. They didn't even notice. We went all the way through security, and they didn't even notice. And she was terrified that she was going to have to throw it away. Real lapse in security there. But overall, it's a convenient airport. If you don't want to fly to New York, it's only an hour and a half, 2 hours drive away. The hilarious thing is that I was looking it up on Wikipedia as far as what the hubs are. Let me know if you've ever heard of any of these airlines, Paul. Hold on, or quick here. Okay, so it's the hub for Cape Air. No. Because it's Cape Cod and it flies between all that area. It is a hub for Delta. So obviously you know that. Yeah. And then Penn Air, which I'd never heard of as well.
Who's that? Penn and Teller? I don't know.
I don't know. It seems to fly. Wow. That's weird. It's headquartered in Alaska, but it's a hub. It only has 20 planes. And
yes, it's very small.
Very, very small. But they also are a focus city for Azores Island airline. Sorry,
Oh.
so Boston has a huge Portuguese population, but it's not
Community,
Portugal
yeah.
Portuguese. It's Azorians, and so there's some great food. But they fly.
Yeah,
It's one of the largest hubs, I would say, probably besides Lisbon or Porto, is
Wow.
Boston. But it's a decent airport, and for layovers, there's a million airports all around it, and you're right downtown, so it is fantastic.
Yeah.
So you can get out if you have like a couple hour layover and at least see something. And Boston is a very walkable city. If you can get in an Uber and not balk at how expensive the Uber is, it's great. So it's a terrible airport, but at least it's close to things you don't have to spend time there.
Well, that's a great to say. To your point, just a parenthesis here, but to your point about the very small area for Virgin America, maybe other airlines in Boston and other airports, guys, you can always hit us up on layovers on Twitter, Facebook, etc., etc. Adding to what I was saying before, it used to be, and it's changed now mostly, but it used to be, and maybe Boston, and I have no idea, but maybe Boston is still the case. It used to be that the airline would actually pay rent for the space in front of the gate.
Huh.
So airlines were trying to have as little space as possible because, of course, there's a cost. It's a fixed cost they don't want to bear, which is why you have so many airports that are built with really bad gates areas, because they're like, it makes sense to have at least line for, I don't know, whether it's premium or whatever, or multiple lines to accommodate everyone. And sometimes it seems that it's like everybody on the gate because like there's no organization because there's no room to organize anything. It's usually a legacy from older times, because now they have new systems of they share the rent of or the cost of the airports, not because of the gate, but because of the number of flights they have, which is fairer than simply the gate area. But that's maybe the reason, or maybe it's just legacy because there was no other room.
Yeah.
But maybe the reason that whoever had that first didn't want to pay for anything and said, okay, let's have the smallest area possible.
Yeah, it really
And
feels like they
that-
cleared out a broom closet to when Virgin America launched there. So I'll see once Virgin decides what they're doing with the brand, if they just shut it down and move it over to where Alaska flies out of, because that might just be a nicer experience for everybody.
Do you have any next flights coming up? I don't know how much you fly, actually. I mean, you kind of hinted at it.
I'm
Mostly,
flying to Denver on next Tuesday. So not in 2 days' time, but in a week in 2 days' time.
Is it a good airport?
Denver is very, very good. It's a hub for somebody, and I'm drawing a blank. But I find it's easy to get to. It's on the outskirts of town. And I'm so used to London or other major cities where it's just like, I look at a map and be like, oh, wow, it's really far out of town. But Denver is one of those really densely laid out cities that then all of a sudden you're in the middle of nowhere, 5 minutes outside of the downtown area. And it's a bit like Portland as well. And so it only takes like 15 minutes to get 20 minutes to get from the airport downtown.
That's great.
So yeah, I'll be out there for about a week. I'm trying to, and where my offices are, there's actually a small private airport there right next to the airport, so our office in Broomfield. And that's where a lot of people get their licenses. There's also a aviation and engineering school right there as well.
Wow.
I do want to get down to Centennial Field, which is on the southeast of Denver. And that's where Boom is based,
Oh, wow. Yeah, of course.
So that's where they're based. And so I want to go
supersonic,
check them out when I have a little bit more free time. So see if I can go see some supersonic planes taking off.
Okay, you'll be back on the show then because we want to know about that.
Exactly. But that's the only flight I have right now. I'm sure I'll have some more just because of the work I'm doing. Seattle, LA, and Austin are quite common for me. So I'm sure I'll be doing those in the next few months.
Yeah, well, we'll get you back. I mean, first of all, I don't know when Alex is coming up because he's taking a little bit of leave, of course, to take care of his family, so that you guys know. And Alex, you also are learning that because you're probably listening to that when it's on. As long as you're not there, I'm going to invite other people to do like this. I wanted the first to be Will because it makes so much sense. So I might have other people that are already kind of lined up because we want Alex to be taking care of Deanne and the kids, and of course Juno 1880, was it? The last time you had a
I'll
girl
double
down?
check and I'll tweet it out at you guys. But according to my mom, it's 1880 was the last time, or roughly around that time, the last time a girl was born into the Hunters.
That's insane. So, again, congratulations, Alex. You did something historical for the Hunter family. Well, now maybe, Will, the pressure is on you, actually.
Exactly. My wife is thinking that the curse has been broken and now everyone's going to have girls.
Exactly. And this was not, guys, because we had people begging us for a layovers / Mastication Nation episode. This was not it. We will do one. We will talk about food at some point down the line. This was not the one. Of course, we want Alex to be there. And you guys are so much better at food than I am. I listen to your podcast with such admiration. I'll put as well the link in the show notes for Mastication Nation. It's episode 11 now. What was the last one? What were you talking about?
Yeah, so Jam was 11. And so we have K coming up, and at some point, we'll figure out when we do that. But it's highly likely that L is makes sense for a layover crossover. Be, yeah. So feel free to tweet any of the three of us or our individual Twitter handles. Ours is mastication.ntn on any specifics you want us to talk about. The thing that I sort of wanted to dive into is more the science of eating at altitude and how there's so much bad science out there. I read like 4 or 5 articles saying different things, and the only one I can trust is the World Health Organization. So, we'll dive into that. We'll dive into, from your perspective, who the best airlines are as far as food. Alex will probably regale us about his Chateau Neuf de Pape that he had on Emirates or whatever it was that he was drinking, and then do a little bit more on the experience in the 1950s where you would have your foie gras and your sparkling champagne while smoking your cigar in a more genteel age of flying. So
flying, yeah.
Tweet us if you have any questions or any ideas that you want us to talk about.
Exactly. I'll put all the links, all our Twitter handles, Facebook pages, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, because nowadays, I'm an old-fashioned guy. I still call that iTunes, but apparently the new term is Apple Podcasts. And all the other links from, of course, Mastication Nation. You guys know the ones from Layovers, but I put them there. Layovers.2 is where you find all this information. We're recording today, again, Sunday, January 7th, 2018. And I aim to release that within the next 24 hours so that Alex gets a surprise. Well, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Paul. Hopefully I was able to step into some rather large shoes.
Little brother, but more than compensated for Alex's absence. Alex, please take 3 months off. It's fine. I have Will. Thank you. Safe travels, guys.
Thanks.